All right. So today we are going over billing and some collaborative processes that I've mentioned. So we'll go over our agenda first. We'll do welcome and check-ins in the chat. We'll go over the interagency agreements, the Developmental Disabilities Administration form process, billing and special education percentage, and then there will be some time for questions. Can you pin or spotlight the ASL interpreter? Yes, thank you. I think that got lost. So 1 second while I repin our interpreter.
Liz here. I think our interpreter accidentally dropped off, and that's why.
I have Karen pinned, and then when Erin rejoins us, no, Erin's in here. Let me see.
Sorry about that. I meant to click look at the meeting, not leave the meeting.
All right, no worries. I think we have both interpreters pinned now. Thank you for checking on that. All right, so our agenda. We'll go over interagency agreements, the Developmental Disabilities Administration form process, billing and special education percentage, and then have some time for questions. So in the chat, if you could check in and introduce yourself to the space with your name, pronouns, role, agency you're coming from, and then I was in a meeting earlier where this question was used as a check-in, and I really liked it. So I will recycle it and use it here. What is your favorite comfort food? So I'll just give everyone like a minute or so to introduce yourself in the chat. This is also a selfish exercise to see all the food options as I'm starting to get hungry for dinner. Love it. I'm seeing a lot of ice cream. Saw in there somewhere mac and cheese, Thai food, noodles, a lot of ice cream. Chocolate, that's a good one. Bean thread noodles and broth, that sounds delicious. I also want ice cream now. Wonderful. So we will move on with our agenda, starting out with the interagency agreement. So Liz, if you could go to the, oh, you beat me to it. So the interagency agreements, this is our policy that we've shared out before in previous trainings. So I'll just read through this. All agencies are required to develop an interagency agreement when more than one agency provides services on the IFSP or oh my gosh, I don't know why IFSP is blanking on me. Liz or Wendy, could you?
Individual Family Service Plan.
Thank you, Anna. And submit to King County. And this is initiated by the DHH FRC. Each agency identifies an IFSP team member responsible for leading communication between agencies. And the DHH FRC will coordinate and schedule evaluations, assessments, IFSP meetings, and transition conferences, including all IFSP team members. IFSP team members share the responsibility to meet required DCYF/ESIT or early support for infants and toddlers, timelines for data entry, and will provide IFSP documents and reports to the FRC to ensure that timelines are met. We'll give folks just a couple seconds to read through that. So what is the purpose of an interagency agreement? The purpose is to promote mutual understanding between King County ESIT agencies when jointly providing services with the child and their family, to support collaboration as a single IFSP team, keeping in mind that the team may be across agencies. That's the whole point of the interagency agreement. To facilitate billing percentages for special education or SE for both agencies. So we'll go over the interagency agreements process. So each agency identifies an IFSP team member responsible for leading communication between agencies. As I mentioned previously, this is most likely going to be the ESIT or DHH point person at your agency, or perhaps a DHH FRC. The DHH FRC initiates the interagency agreement process. We'll share an example of an interagency agreement form. The DHH FRC would start the process out by filling out the boxes under agency 1. And then once the DHH FRC fills out the information for their agency, so for example, if it starts with kindering, the DHH FRC at kindering fills out FRC services for kindering if the child is only receiving FRC services. If there are other services, that would be listed on the interagency agreement as well. Then the DHH FRC sends via secure email the interagency agreement to all agencies that are listed on the IFSP. The DHH agency in this case fills out the interagency agreement as either agency 2 or 3, depending on how many agencies are serving the child. And so they fill out their portion of services under one of those buckets, agency 2 or 3. And then whoever is the last agency to complete the interagency form submits to King County. So the DHH agency submits the completed and signed interagency agreement to everybody on the IFSP, so agencies 1 and 2 and King County. So here's an example of a portion of the interagency agreement form. There are some instructions on the form and some other pieces right before this part where the FRC puts their contact information, and then the form itself kind of explains what it's for. But this portion is probably going to be the most relevant that you'll fill out. So you'll fill out the child's first and last name, their ESIT ID number, date of birth, their most recent IFSP date, and when services may end, or when this interagency agreement might end. I see a question. Can KCDD provide an updated list of agency contact people for DHH processes? Yes, absolutely. So these are the boxes that I was referring to. So it starts with agency 1, that would be the agency with the DHH FRC. They fill out the box with their agency name, who the IFSP team member is going to be the contact for this, their email address, and the services that that agency will provide. So if it's FRC only one service would be listed on there. If the child is also receiving other services at that agency, those would be listed on here as well. And then once the DHH FRC fills out their portion for their agency, they send that over to the next agency. If there are only 2 on the interagency agreement, just those first 2 boxes are filled out. If there are more agencies, it would keep going to the next agency. So agency 2, most likely the DHH agency that will be serving the child, fills out their information under that agency 2 box. And once the form is completely filled out, signed, and everything by both agencies, or 3, then the last agency to fill this out sends it to all agencies on the IFSP and to King County. So now I'll pause a little bit and open it up to the space for a little bit of a community brainstorm. So 2 questions that I'd like to put out there. How will you use the interagency agreement to promote teaming? It's not just a form. How will you use this to promote teaming across agencies? And how could you use an interagency agreement to improve communication and collaboration?
Liz here. Norma, are you hoping for people to unmute themselves and share, or share in the chat?
Either or both works. It might be helpful to hear from agencies that have been using these so far.
This is Wendy. Can you go back 1 step to the form, please? Jenny asked if King County could provide an updated list of agency contact people for DHH processes. That's a good thing. But for this, you want somebody on the IFSP team in all those, the 3rd line down, the IFSP team designated contact. You want the FRC in that space under agency 1. You want the providers from the other agencies, if there's more than one listed. Those would be the IFSP team designated contacts, not the agent, not who signs at the agency might be a different person, but you want the contact people to all be listed. And the answer is yes, you will get the contact people for all of this. We're working on getting them updated. We're working on hearing from some of the agencies, but for each of the interagency agreements, this should be this first line, IFSP team designated contact, and their contact emails should be people who are on the IFSP. Sorry, I just thought that that might help with how will you use interagency agreements, because some agencies have been putting other people, a billing person in that space or somebody else. And the goal is that it's people on the IFSP team.
So Wendy, this is Mark Fowler at Listen Talk. So for agency 1, should that always be the FRC?
Yes. The IFSP team designated contact for agency 1 should be the FRC.
Liz here. I see a couple of questions in the chat, and then I want to go to Jessica, who raised her hand. Mary McBride from Family Conversations asked, would it be possible to put the ADSA number on this form, DDA form, the DDA number?
This is Wendy. In theory, that's a great idea. We'll be talking about Developmental Disabilities Administration applications, which is how you get an ADSA number. And so we don't want to pause the interagency agreement while waiting to get the ADSA number. So it is possible we could add a space, but we'd have to figure out how to keep things moving forward without the ADSA number, which is the Developmental Disabilities Administration form. And yes, the directions will stay included in the form. This is just a picture of the form.
Liz here, and thanks for adding your questions into the chat. We can address them either through chat or during the portion of the training.
So I see in the chat, there is a question. What if agency 1 is providing services also? Wouldn't you put one of the providers because the FRC's name is above? Liz, do you know if the form, because some of this on the form, there are different versions of the ones that I've seen. And I haven't personally filled one out. So those of you that have filled one out probably have more experience with this than I do. Does the form allow you to put in more than one contact person in that space? Or could we edit it to do that?
Liz here. I'll ask our providers, does the form allow that? And we certainly could edit it.
This is Anna Dodd from the Parent Infant Program. Can you say that last question again about the email?
Yeah, so the question in the chat is, what if agency one is providing services also? Wouldn't you put one of the providers because the FRC's name is above? So this is referencing how the FRC's name and contact information goes further up on this form. So you could put the FRC's name and contact information up above where it goes. And if your agency so agency one is also providing services to the kiddo, then you could put the provider's name in the in that IFSP team designated contact box.
This is Wendy. I think that the main idea is that there is one primary contact person for each agency to support the IFSP team. We know there might be additional people, so that's why it says IFSP team designated contact. Typically, that would be the Family Resources Coordinator. Again, this is just a picture of the form. I do believe that there is a part of the form where you list who the FRC is. You're asking, is it duplicative to have the FRC above and also the IFSP team designated contact be the FRC? The purpose, this was designed for two purposes, like Norma just described. One is to improve cross-agency teaming, and which need improvement. And the other is to promote, make sure that we're doing the special education billing in ways that make sense based on who all is serving the child.
Hi, everyone. This is Jessica from the Parent Infant Program at HSDC. May I offer what I think is some clarity on the use of this form, since I deal with it a lot? I think the question being asked is, if there's more than one person serving the family from the same agency that the FRC is with, does that person for that service, for example, OT or PT, get put in under agency number 2? In my experience, they do. So agency 1 lists the FRC, and then agency 2 would be from the same agency, the other service provider, OT or PT or SLP or whatever, and then the DHH agency that's separate would be agency 3. So each service provider is typically included in my experience, even if 2 of them are from the same agency.
But it's not, this is Wendy, that's not what was intended. We could, in the community of practice going forward, get additional feedback on this form and how it's intended. And I think that maybe that would help with that next question, but it's really trying to get have a primary point of contact for each agency.
Okay, great. So this is Jessica again, just to clarify. So that shouldn't happen going forward then?
Not right now.
Awesome. That's really, really helpful to know. Thank you so much.
Wendy, this is Mark Fowler. I have another question, please. On the form itself, the instructions call for agency 1 to, let me see if I can read it. review the IFSP and double check the accuracy of all the information, does that mean that agency 1 fills in the information for agency 2 and 3 as to sessions and frequency? Or do they just leave it blank and agency 2 and agency 3 fill it in?
This is Norma. So agency 1 would just fill out the information for themselves. The agency with the FRC fills out that first box, and then the DHH FRC passes it over, or FRC passing to another agency, passes it over to agency 2, and then agency 2 fills out the relevant information for their agency. So adding the services that they're providing for the kiddo under that box. Agency 1 wouldn't fill it out for agency 2.
Okay, I have a little concern about that, and that is that agency 1 never sees the form again, I think, looking at your timeline in the previous slide. And so they never verify that the information is what they thought it was from the FRC. Might not be a problem if King County verifies it.
Liz, could you pull up this is Norma. Could you pull up the interagency process slide? So agency 1 fills out their portion, sends it over to agency 2. So if there are 3 agencies, then agency 2 would send it over to agency 3. Whoever the last agency is to complete and fill out their portion on the form sends the completed document to all of the previous agencies and to King County. So the hope would be that the agencies earlier on in the process, 1 and 2, would receive the final copy of that form once the last agency fills out their portion and sends it back to everybody on the IFSP and to King County. And I will say, so I have recently started handling the dual allocations billing process myself. And the interagency agreement is so important for that because it makes it easier for me to see which children are dually served, if children are receiving FRC only services from the agency with their FRC, or if they're receiving other services. So that later on in the PowerPoint, we'll go over the special education percentages, but having that interagency agreement in place and with King County makes it easier for me when I go to do the dual allocation process to know whether your agency is getting 50% or the FRC only rate. So these are super helpful and eliminate me tracking you down with questions for the dual allocation process.
Okay, thanks for clarifying.
Norma, this is Sandy from Children's Therapy Center. When I fill this form out, I fill out for each agency off the IFSP what the services are. So then we're taking it off the IFSP, so that has just been updated. So then everybody sees what is on the IFSP, and then if there's a problem in between, then they would come back and say, oh no, the services are different than what are on the IFSP. And so that's what I thought the purpose was for the FRC agency to be one, is so that they reflected what was on the IFSP. So maybe I'm doing it wrong.
This is Wendy. I wouldn't say that you're doing it wrong. In a certain way, that makes sense, Sandy. But the person who's at the bottom of your agency is signing to verify that that is accurate. So, the signature, whoever the signature person is, which could be the same as a designated contact, or in some places, the signer is the person, is a billing person or somebody else. The signer is verifying that the information for your agency is accurate. The signer could be the person on the IFSP team. And that would be an opportunity to relook at the IFSP and say, oh, oops. or something like that, right? So yes, it should be aligned with the IFSP, the number and type of services. And also it should be verified by the signer. Because again, will make the billing split decisions based on what's on the IFSP. Along with that, one thing we haven't talked about is if the child has a teacher, a TSVI, teacher for students with visual impairments, that might be the third agency if the TSVI, teacher of student with visual impairments, is not at the agency with the FRC. So in that case, they won't get any of the special education funds because that's not how we fund TSVI right now. But we still want to know that they are part of the team, a critical part of a single team.
So, Wendy, this is Sandy. I have one more question then. If the signer can be anyone at the agency, how do we know who to send it to? So like now what I do is I know that for HSDC, I send it to Anna, and I can't remember the other person I send it to. When I go to listen and talk, I send it to this person. I have the names down, and I'm assuming those are the people that typically sign. But if it's FR, so I sign CTCs and then I send it on to the next one as we're the FRC. So do you just send it to anybody, or how do you know who to send it to?
Liz here. Our instructions currently say all email addresses above at participating agencies, but I'm wondering if in reality, what's currently happening and what would be best practice.
This is Kayla from Northwest Center. When you're the first agency, there are no email addresses above to send it to, like at agency 2, right? Like Northwest Center has a child that they're sharing with Listen and Talk. Mark Fowler's name is not yet on here because he's going to be the agency signer, and he will put his name on here after I send it to him.
This is Norma. So this is where Jenny's question from earlier will be helpful, getting a list of contact information out to everybody. So we'll get that signer person's contact information from the DHH agencies to share with the DHH FRCs so they know who to send it to.
And can I say to Norma that, and we need it vice versa, we knew, because in the past, these haven't always come from the DHH FRC. They come from their billing people at a lot of places. So we need that on the chart as well. Who to expect it from, who to go to when they don't show up, that kind of thing.
Thank you. That is really helpful. So we'll get a list of contact information for everyone, so you know who to send things to, and like was stated, who you'll be receiving something from, so that when you see their name in your inbox, you know that it is the interagency agreement that you need to fill out and submit.
This is Kayla from Northwest Center again. Not something we have to solve right now, but that agency signer title is, doesn't tell us a lot of who it is. So we might just change that. I don't know what will work for everyone, but it could be like billing point person or DHH point person, right? Just it might be easier for communicating about who that person is at every agency.
I'm gonna read, this is Wendy, I'm gonna read Anna's question out loud. Agency 1 as the Northwest Center DHH FRC, and then Agency 2 is the same Northwest Center, same agency. No, the agency is two agencies, Northwest Center DHH and whoever the Northwest Center DHH FRC at the first agency. Their other service providers are at that same agency. They're at Northwest Center, and then Agency 2 would be the other agency. Just with all of this discussion, it's clear that this process needs a little bit of improvement, and we believe in process improvement. That's why we're all here. So one of the thoughts, I have two thoughts. One is it seems like the emphasis on using this tool for the billing payments has been the emphasis on the division of the special education fund has been the emphasis. We're wondering, and maybe this is something we could think about, how could this also be a tool for improving coordination across agencies, interagency coordination, not just billing? And maybe we move to all these questions because people have a lot of questions, or maybe it's not quite working yet for the second purpose. But, and maybe we need to plan for this discussion just slightly differently to try and figure out how to get it working for the second purpose. Maybe we can pivot to that. Could you see an interagency agreement being useful to promote teaming, communication, or collaboration? And what would need to be on it for that to work well? Or how would it need to be changed for that to work well?
Liz here. Elizabeth had written something in the chat and now she's raising her hand. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
I was just going to share what I had in the chat. Elizabeth here from Kindering. The IAA is put together after the IFSP has been written and services have been agreed upon. So there is an extreme amount of collaboration that happens prior to this, as in needing to discuss, doing the intake and the referral and connecting with all of the agencies. I think the collaboration should be, if we are working on it being improved, happens prior to the IA. I don't reference this for collaboration. It's definitely something that goes to our billing department here at Kindering, and is more focused on the service plan after the IFSP has already been structured, with a lot of collaboration with the other agencies. So that's just kind of my 2 cents for these two questions. I don't know if it's definitely a collaborating tool, and there would need to be some improvements if it was to be maybe in the timeline.
Liz here. Sandy in the chat says, well, actually backing up, both Mark, Mandy, and Sandy all say they agree with Elizabeth. And then Sandy in the chat says, I wonder if the IFSP doc is the document that promotes teaming and collaboration by putting the provider's name on. IAA really feels more like a billing tool. And Liz here, Mary raised her hand. Go ahead, Mary.
Hi, having started using this tool, what was it, 1.5 years ago? Was it 2.5? Who knows? COVID time, the years start to go, but it did, I believe, improve collaboration just a bit when we started using it, because of the guidance in it to remember to include DHH agencies in the planning. Prior to the agreement, to the IAA agreements, we found out about IFSP meetings often from the family or the day before they were going to happen. And I believe that this agreement that clearly asks or says in writing that we need to collaborate made a difference. Now I have to say that some agencies we've worked with more than others, and they seem to have adopted that as a way of doing things, but other agencies that it's new to them, they're a little more lost about it. It hasn't helped. But in general, trying to say is that it did seem to increase communication.
I just had an aha. I don't know if it's useful or not, but I really appreciate everybody's candidness in this room and clarity. Really, this IAA on the individual child level supports billing. And maybe what we need to develop or spend a little time working on is an interagency, a more general interagency agreement between all of the agencies that supports the collaboration, teaming, communication, has the updated who to contact when, and all of that. I don't know, if it would be helpful to do something like that in addition to just having a list of who to contact. Anyway, we can think more about that later, but thanks. I feel like I get something better than I did before.
This is Norma. All right, so we're going to move on to the Developmental Disabilities Administration application. So the DHH FRC is responsible for initiating all DDA applications and or the change forms to DDA, and CCing any other agency on the IFSP. The other agency on the IFSP, for example, any DHH agency, is responsible for following up with DDA to ensure the authorization is in place with their agency.
This is Wendy. Before you move on, this is a change from what we've been asking for up to date. So this is a change.
So the Developmental Disabilities Administration application process, we've tried to simplify it as much as possible. The DHH FRC completes the DDA application or the change form, whichever one is relevant, and submits that DDA application. The DHH FRC CCs all agencies on the IFSP in communication to DDA. And the DHH agency is responsible to follow up, so to check for complete and accurate documents, follow up with DDA to ensure authorization is in place for their agency, and then DDA creates authorization for one or more provider agencies to serve or bill for that child. So we have an example of a portion of the DDA form. We reached out to DDA and got some clarity around some of the instructions for this. There was a question around the last box on here, Part C, Early Intervention Provider / FRC Agency, and how one might note that more than one agency needs to be authorized. So the way that the form reads, it could be interpreted as only one agency being able to be added there. But we got clarity from DDA. The way to add both agencies on there, you could put like 1, Kindring, 2, HSDC, and that will signal to our DDA contact that 2 agencies need to be authorized. So sending the form with both agencies and FRCs clearly listed, and any ROIs or one single DSHS consent form attached to that email. And if you can note in the body of the email that you're sending to DDA, reminding them that both agencies need authorization, that would be helpful. Not a requirement, but it would be helpful to signal both agencies need authorization. So going over DDA change forms, the DHH FRC is responsible for submitting change forms to DDA, as previously mentioned. So this goes over when a change form is needed and when a change form is not needed. So a change form is needed when adding a provider agency. This is beyond that initial application. So that on the initial application, the DHH FRC would note both agencies that need to be on the application. So this is if we know upfront a child is receiving services from Kindring and HSDC, both of those agencies are added on there. If a kiddo switches from one of those agencies to another one, a change form would be needed to add a provider agency or change a provider agency. And when a change form is not needed, exits. You do not need to submit a change form when a child exits, but continue to indicate exits on billing. King County sends a monthly list to DDA. I see Mary has her hand raised.
So we've had an ongoing issue with, or when we get added to an IFSP. So for instance, if a child has multiple needs, the family might not want DHH services right away, or their hearing is detected, or hearing's progressive or something, and it's detected later. In those cases, we often never see the ADSA or DDA number on our billing. And is that because the FRC hasn't done a change form, or how can we check for that?
I'll answer that. This is Wendy. That's because this is a new process. In the past, if a DHH agency was added, then the DHH agency was responsible to do the change form.
But then there was a whole period of time where they didn't have a change form at all.
That's right. And it was just all done via email. They just in the past month asked us to go back to using change forms. There's some more questions about DDA. Do we want to answer them now?
Yeah, this is Norma. I was just about to read Mark's question. Does this include simple changes like address? And I will lean on Wendy and Liz to answer that.
Liz here. I think yes, I see Mary's comment, not in the past. I am sharing my screen, so I can't go back in my email, but I'm gonna see if I can find the guidance we got from DDA. So I will share that out after this training.
I think it was everything. They want change forms for almost everything because they found that they had better data entry if we put all the details in about the change, whether it's an updated address or an updated provider, additional provider, all the other changes. But it is good to go back and look and verify that guidance that we sent out. I think it's just a few weeks ago.
Liz here, another question in the chat from Livia is, do we need to include an ROI for the newly added agency and DSHS DDA when sending a change form to add another provider agency? I think Liz here again. I think Wendy, I'd love your backup on this. From King County's perspective, the work that you're doing is coordinating for services for children. So from King County's perspective, you wouldn't need an ROI, but your agency and DDA may require an ROI. Liz here, I saw that Wendy agrees. I also want to acknowledge that we've got Liz here again. I also want to acknowledge that we've got Snohomish and Pierce County folks in the room, and this may be different in different counties. And so wanted to invite Pierce and Snohomish to share about their ROI policies, just for those of us who cross county lines.
This is Brady from Pierce County. You're putting me on the spot, Liz. I'm like, do we need different ones? I think we have the same process, but I'll fact check that. Thanks.
Liz here, I know we're putting you on the spot, so we'll all get back to you on that. Thanks.
Wendy here. I think that for King and Snohomish County, DDA requires a release of information. So my guess is they would require it for the second agency too. So.
Liz here. Livia found the guidance email. Thank you, Livia. Yes, so use a DDA change form for phone number, address, county change, primary provider change, and new consent or ROI is also required for HIPAA or name change. DDA can continue to receive just an email for name, spelling changes, or birth date. Liz here. Do we feel ready to move to the next slide, or do we want to continue to ask questions?
This is Wendy. I'm seeing Eric's question. I assume that when DDA application is submitted, the folks from the DHH agency that are CC'd are the billing contacts, correct? Thanks for that question, Eric. In the past, the FRC uploaded the DDA application into the data management system. And then whoever from the DHH agency had to go in and submit it to DDA. So in the past doesn't really apply. And I do think we need this updated mailing list of who do we send what to, and possibly this updated non-child specific interagency agreement list that will help you know who to send things to.
Liz here, since we're, I don't see any other questions, and since we're in a little bit of a natural lull, I'm going to suggest that we take a quick either 3 or 5 minute break. Who would folks want 3 minutes or 5 minutes? I can't see many screens, but maybe whoever shouts out first can decide for us all. 5. Okay, we'll come back at 4 o'clock.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Wendy. And now we're going to shift to billing and the special education percentage. And as we said earlier, it seems like the interagency agreements have been really focused on getting the special education percentages right. And the reason for that is we can only fund one special education, adding up to 100% of the rate. But for Part C, Best Starts for Kids, or Child Development Services, if two agencies are serving, they both can bill the full amount according to the billing rules. So I know not everybody in the room is a billing person, but I just wanted to make sure that that part is clear before we move on. Otherwise, this won't make sense. And I'm not seeing any questions. So I'm just going to invite us to take a nice, big, deep breath, which we probably haven't done in a while. And if there are any questions, unmute or put it in the chat, and then we'll move on to this, how this will work.
Liz here. Wendy, I'm wondering if you could say it one more time, because to be honest, I tuned out a little bit because we were just coming back. And I wonder if anyone else did the same thing. So this time I can really concentrate on what you're saying we need to know before we go on to the next part.
Oh, good. This is Wendy again. You are brave. Yes, this is the time of day that we can all zone out. Okay. In terms of King County funding, the special education funding is different because if more than one agency is serving a child, we can only pay out 100% of one special education rate based on where the child lives. A King County rate, basically, or a Pierce County rate are the only rates that we pay. Okay. But if a child is served by more than one agency, each agency can bill for Part C, Best Starts for Kids, Child Development Services. They're smaller amounts, but we allow each agency to bill for the full amount. So just wanted to make sure that that is clear and that that is different. So any questions about that in particular? I'll hold your question for a minute, Livia. Okay, I'm going to start with the first line going across, where a child has deaf, hard of hearing services at one of the DHH agencies and a DHH FRC only at the full service agency. In that case, the DHH agency can bill, if they serve the child, for Part C, Best Starts for Kids, and Child Development Services, and 90% of special education. And the full service agency can bill if if they served the child. For Part C, Best Starts for Kids, and 10% of the special education rate. And then it says they cannot bill CDS, Child Development Services, for FRC only services. And there's an asterisk there, and the asterisk got dropped off this page. And what it used to say is that if an evaluation was provided or assessment by other people at the full service agency in the previous month, then the full service agency can bill for CDS, Child Development Services, that month. I'm going to pause now and go to Livia's question. She asked about special education billing percentages. Are those calculated and adjusted by King County following billing submittal? Yes. It's done following billing submittal. And it's one of the reasons why we need everybody's billing on time, is because we wait for all the billing to come in before we assign those rates. And yeah. And Liz is writing, Mandy, this situation at the top of the chart is the situation you were asking about earlier. FRC only and DHH services without a full service provider like a physical therapist. Okay, any other questions about this line 1, where the main service provider is at the DHH agency and the FRC is at the full service agency?
Wendy, it's Julia from Kindring.
Yeah.
Did you say that if they had an evaluation in the month, we could bill CDS?
If they had an evaluation in the previous month and there's an IFSP in place.
Okay.
Yes. Because, and let me explain that. The reason why DDA does not allow billing for FRC only services, but if there had been an evaluation in preparation for the IFSP, that would have involved somebody other than the FRC at your agency, then you can bill for that as a face-to-face service if there is an IFSP in place. If the IFSP isn't in place till the following month, then you would not be able to bill for it, because you can only bill King County if there's an IFSP in place.
So Wendy, this is Sandy.
Mhm.
So in that case, DDA will not have processed the DDA application. Can we back bill for that service once they get it finally processed?
That's such.
But we wouldn't.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
But we wouldn't probably have put it on our billing to back bill for, because I don't know. That just seems really confusing. And I just don't know how that would really actually happen, because DDA takes so long to process applications.
Thank you, Sandy. This is a great question. When you're billing King County, it asks you, were face-to-face services provided or coordination only? And if the answer is coordination only, you cannot bill child development services. If there were face-to-face services provided in the previous month and the IFSP was in place the previous month and the DDA application was submitted the previous month, so that's a reason to submit, your applications right away, then you could bill for CDS. Because you provided that as a face-to-face service. If the IFSP is not yet in place, you can't bill for any of this. Or if the evaluation happened 2 months ago, you wouldn't be able as a full service agency to bill for CDS. So it may be rare that this sort of thing happens, but it would be allowed. Any other questions about the first line before we move to the second line? Okay, so now is the situation that happens with about 40% of the deaf, hard of hearing kids within our ESIT system. That the full service agency has both a DHH FRC and more services at that agency. And there's a DHH services from a DHH agency. So then that case, the DHH agency can bill if they serve the child for Part C, Best Starts for Kids, and Child Development Services, and they'll get 50% of the special education funding. The full service agency can bill the same plus insurance if the services that were provided are insurance billable. Any questions about that?
Hi, Wendy. I do have a question. Maybe I just don't know much. Sorry, this is Melinda.
Hi, Melinda.
My question is, I thought that some DHH agencies also hired SLPs on their teams. Would they not also be able to bill for insurance?
Thank you for that question, Melinda. This is a hard one to answer. The best way that I have to answer is, at this time, none of the DHH agencies are billing insurance for ESIT services. And the reason why, it has to do with equity between the different types of providers at the DHH agencies. It may shift, and from a SOPAF, System of Payments and Fees perspective, it may shift over time, but it's also true that the System of Payments and Fees may be modified in the coming year. So at this time, none of the DHH agencies are billing insurance for their speech services, because they're providing, what they're providing is not necessarily speech services. And someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's my understanding. Anybody have any updates on that you want to improve upon my answer? Okay. Any other questions on this second line? And because that person, the speech therapist doing family education and visits, is not billing for speech, in the rare situation that a full service agency might also be providing speech services, you would not need to coordinate around billing dates for insurance. But once that changes, there would need to be some coordination, because for most insurance policies, you can't bill two of the same services two different places. But that's probably more details than you needed to know. Erase that part. Let's just go back. Are there any other questions? If there are billing changes, all ESIT providers would be notified. Jenny, can you ask your question again?
Hi, Wendy. Yes, I mean, so like if I understand what you're saying, the little statement you just tried to read, you like say, oh, never mind, retract. I completely understand what you meant by that. So I guess I'm saying if DHH providers, their SLPs do begin to bill insurance, would that be sent out, like, would that be communicated to all ESIT providers in King County so that we're all aware that that billing change has happened, so we know about that coordination piece?
Thanks, Jenny. Yes, we will make sure to communicate that if that changes. All right, Elizabeth has a question related to line 1 and 3. Let's do line 3 first, and then we'll come back to your question. Line 3 is right now a very rare situation. I think we've had 2 kids in the past year where there are 2 DHH agencies partnering to serve a child. In the future state, then there would also be a DHH family resource coordinator at a full service agency. And when I say this is extremely rare, it's been done by exception. In the first 2 trainings, we talked about a pilot to allow this more often. And at last week's session, it was raised, could we work on fleshing out how this will work as a pilot before starting it? So we're honoring that request, and we won't be starting this as a pilot yet. We will have opportunities to discuss and improve upon in the community of practice and through other approaches with everybody involved. But there are going to be some situations, 2, we think, where there are 2 DHH agencies and a DHH FRC at a full service agency. In that case, everything is not the same. Both DHH agencies can bill if they serve the child for Part C, Best Starts for Kids, Child Development Services, and 45% of the special education amount. And the full service agency can bill if they serve the child for Part C, BSK, 10% of the special education, cannot bill for child development services except in some very specific situations. Okay, I'm going to go back to Elizabeth's question, and then if you have other questions, feel free to add them. Let's see. Elizabeth says, this is in regards to line 1 and 3. So a DHH FRC needs to make sure the evaluation and the initial IFSP happen in the same month to get funding for the evaluation for the full service agency. No. Okay, this greatly impacts scheduling, coordination, and timeline, so I want to make sure that I'm understanding that correctly. Thank you. The full service agency can bill for an evaluation insurance if the family has insurance, whether or not they bill for child development services, and whether or not the child is determined eligible for Part C, whether or not you go forward with an IFSP. So that's not dependent on the date. I wouldn't stress about it too much, but if the IFSP is scheduled in the same month as the evaluation, you may also be able to bill for child development services. So I wouldn't push that for a single child when you're not going to be doing tons of evaluations of these kids. It's just not worth the stress of that. But if it happens, it could be billed for as a face-to-face service provided. Other questions about line 3? Any other questions about billing and special education percentage? I have one more weird piece of information that relates to Livia's earlier question that probably everybody has been wondering about. I'm just kidding. It's not that exciting. But each of these lines say can bill if served. And that means according to what served means for that fund source. And I want to tell you what happens if you didn't serve. If you check no, not served, and the other agency did serve, then the other agency gets the full 100% of special education funding. So it's really important that you only check that coordination or face-to-face if you actually can document that you provided it during that month. If you didn't provide it, then you're not, then the other agency gets, and the other agency did provide it, they will get 100% of the special education funding. And that is done on the back end at King County. So make sure you have all of your documentation in place when you do your billing that the child was served the previous month, either with coordination or face-to-face services, and to access your special education funding, that the IFSP was still in place on the first day of the month. Make sure you have all your documentation that that is true before you bill.
This is Norma. So now we can have a few more minutes left to answer any other questions that we might not have gotten to earlier on in the presentation, or if you have any questions that have come up.
Hi, this is Kayla from Northwest Center. I'm thinking about the children who are transitioning now, maybe June or July. When do the new processes go into effect? Specifically, like the DDA change form, responsibility. Yeah, so just wondering if there's like a start date for any of the things that are new.
This is Norma. For any new referrals, so this isn't necessarily what you're saying, Caleb, but for any new referrals, the start date would be July 1st. That's when we're transitioning over to the new process. For the children that are going to be transferred from Robin's caseload to the other agencies, I'll be sending out those emails to the 3 agencies after this meeting today. We're going to set up some time to go over that process and come up with those dates of who will be responsible for what when. So stay tuned. This is Norma. Elizabeth asked in the chat, have the documents, websites, and resources been sent out from previous meetings? They are on the website under ESIT DHH system improvement, but I will send a follow-up email with all of the information that we've shared up to this point. Ran into a little bit of a glitch with the video from last week, so I'm still working on that. So the video itself has not been uploaded, but the slide deck and information from Christine, who shared with us last week, those should be on the website. And I'll send that link out to everybody in case you haven't seen it. If there are no more questions, we'll go ahead and close out. Thank you so much for joining us. All of the information that we've shared will be on the website. I'll send a follow-up email with all of the information that we've shared so far, just in case you haven't seen that website link. Thank you all.